Good afternoon. My name is Bob Quinlan, and on behalf of NAFA and NAFA National Member Benefits Committee, I'd like you to welcome to the family meeting. At this time, if you can please silence your cell phones and keep them off for the whole presentation, it'd be appreciated. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce you our speaker. Jim Silbernagel is an independent agent registered with Woodbury Financial Services, Incorporated. He is a co-host and co-creator of NAFA ClientCast, powered by Real Wealth, a NAFA member benefit and marketing program, and Real Wealth, a weekly podcast for financial professionals. And if you don't subscribe to it or have looked into it, I would highly recommend you do that. It's a free benefit. Jim also leads Power Session Live, a monthly best practice session for Real Wealth and NAFA ClientCast subscribers. I've known Jim for 7-8 years, and we've became good friends over these years through NAFA, so please welcome Jim Silbernagel.
All right, I'll start out by saying they got a mic lived up over here. I like to do an interactive session. I find I learn better when there's questions and answers, and so if anybody has questions along the way, I encourage questions. Let me start out with just kind of giving you the genesis of how I came up with this concept and why I'm doing it. One thing we all have is, when clients say, geez, I didn't know you did that, it's a little bit frustrating. But what I think, and you miss maybe one sale, right? But what happens when you create all this wealth for a family, you do all the planning, and it just walks out the door because they passed away, right when all your planning comes to fruition? You've lost the opportunity. So that always went through my head as I'm doing all this planning for my clients, because most of my clients that I had been working with, I started out with Med Sup, so I'm already talking to people 65 plus. And then I got into the financial services and all those types of things. So I wanted to know how to keep the wealth. And recently, you mentioned we do these webinars. Last month's webinar, or the month before, we had a gal on that talked about 88% of widows and widowers leave the financial advisor because there's not even a connection made between spouses. Now, I haven't had that problem personally, but if that's an average statistic, we need to do a better job communicating and including both spouses in on meetings. Now, I learned early in my career, I won't even talk about planning options much more than superficially or just on the surface unless I have both decision makers in the room. But the numbers are, I think, even more staggering with the kids when wealth transfers. And I was involved in a study group, and one of the members of my study group, he got an in with a hospital up in the Minneapolis area, and he did their group health. Now, he had a great deal because he'd spend about a half a day ordering the quotes, and then when the renewals, he'd deliver the renewal message and he'd re-sign them up. And he did this every year, put in maybe a full day, and he was making about $250,000 a year on the health insurance for one day's work. Pretty awesome gig if you can get it. Well, he also took advantage of that, and he did a lot of life insurance with all these docs, years after year after year. He was a perennial top-of-the-table member, and he decided in the last few years before he decided to retire, he finally decided to even take advantage of all these docs were asking him to invest money for him, so he thought, well, maybe I should do that too, and he started gathering assets. So he decides to retire. He's got hundreds of millions of dollars and maybe even billions of dollars of face amount in insurance. Nobody wanted to buy his life insurance practice. Okay, they bought his securities practice, but they didn't want the life insurance. They weren't willing to give him a nickel for it. Now imagine that, billions of dollars of death benefits. But he had zero relationship with the families. I mean, what's it worth? I mean, we can go in the phone book and find people that have life insurance. Half of Americans, I think, still have life insurance. So it wasn't real good. And that, I'll tell you what, when he went through that process, and we as a study group were trying to figure out a way to create value for him so that he could get something for his practice, or at least position it in a way, and he was ready for retirement, so he didn't want to all of a sudden strike up relationships with the kids. It really got me thinking. And I had done family meetings in the past, The way I used to do it, because, and I got to tell you, I'm very passionate about education, and what really ticks me off is when I hear these ads, if you have $500,000 or more, you're worthy, okay? But if you're a kid trying to get started, you just aren't worthy. Figure it out on your own, and when you got money, then it's worth it for me to talk to you. Those things tick me off. I think we have a responsibility to serve all, and I think it's our way of giving back if we take a little bit of time with those that don't have the money but strive to have the money. So as I go forward with that, I'm thinking to myself, how do I improve the value of the practice? How do I make these connections? And we started out by doing seminars for families. Okay, families of clients, come in, bring your kids in, we'll kind of talk about what we all did. Well, unfortunately, a lot of energy. I hate seminars. I hate being, working at night and organizing everything. So I didn't like doing them. Plus, they weren't very effective. I mean, I didn't really get a lot of business. I didn't get a lot of interaction. I don't think the kids made much of a connection because it was too generic. It was one size fits all. So now, the point I'm in my practice right now, it is mandatory. I tell them right up front in our first initial meeting, I said, you may choose to engage me or not, but we'll go through all this, and if you decide to work with me, okay, I will tell you at some point, we'll agree when that is together, we will have a family meeting, okay? And that is a mandatory obligation. We're going to have a family meeting. Now, if the kids aren't old enough yet, they're not ready, that's fine, but we're going to decide, and when we do our reviews, we're going to decide, are they ready yet? Are they ready yet? Are they ready yet? Okay? Now, one of the objections I'd always get, okay, I don't want my kids knowing all this. There's still that element of society that says, he who dies with the most secrets and the most toys wins, and we can't tell our kids anything, and it's a big surprise when the estate is settled. Well, I don't think that's really good planning. And I tell them, I said, one of the reasons I make this mandatory, I ask them, I said, I'm sure you've heard the horror stories. I mean, I remember one client that told me that they had not spoken to one of their siblings in like 40 years. All they remember is they're ticked off. They can't even remember the reason anymore. I hear people, and it's not always the money. The money, you would think the money would always be the issue. I come from not that affluent of an area. I'm in a town of 4,000. I would say household income at tops is maybe averages around 75,000. Investable assets, maybe $250,000. So it's not like there's tons of money there to fight over. But they're fighting over, mom's ring or the hunting gun that doesn't work anymore. I mean, they get so bent out of shape from misunderstandings that it just ain't worth it. Now, a lot of times there's money issues too, but some of the most blood-curdling arguments that split families apart ends up being just the sentimental things. And if there's not that dialogue and there's not that discussion, we're going to have those problems. So I tell my clients, I said, look, my goal is when it's Christmas time, they say Merry Christmas to each other and mean it, okay? So if we can get this discussion going, I said, I think it's going to be much better and much smoother. I said, besides that, I look at the kids as my ground troops, okay? We're doing some planning here, and we do a lot of planning. I mean, I'm very comprehensive in my approach. We have an attorney in our office. We have a CPA firm in our office. So we do tax returns. We do estate planning, business planning. I do investments. We have a property casualty agency. I mean, we cover all the bases. And now I don't personally do all that, but we do cover those bases. And I said, one of the things that we do, how many people in here have been involved at all in Title 19 planning, like with nursing homes and stuff like that? Okay, and those rules are changing. It's more and more difficult to save assets. And in Wisconsin, we have something with the power of attorney that if someone doesn't elect to have specific divestment privileges in a power of attorney, you cannot do any transfers of assets, even between spouses that take advantage of community spouse exemptions, without that language in a power of attorney, if someone's not capable of making the decisions themselves. So, and the other thing is, now, I know we have Bob in Minnesota, okay? I just heard this recently because we had a speaker at our local NAFA, the gal that's taking over Denny Zarbach's business. What's her name, Bob? Sarah. So she mentioned that in Minnesota now you have a state inheritance tax at $1 million exemption, right? And I've heard that 37 states have that. I don't know if that number's accurate, maybe it's 30 or whatever. They've brought back inheritance tax. How many of those states follows the federal regulation as far as having the spouse automatically qualify for that exemption? Do you know? My understanding is one. Okay, one state where you can just file a form and the surviving spouse can keep the exemption. So in all those states, you still need bypass or credit shelter provisions in an AB trust to get both the exemptions. And I listen to all these attorneys crying the blues. The states have kept them in business. They don't even know it. Okay? So the thing is, what I'm instilling on those clients is, look, I don't know unless someone tells me or we catch it in the paper that someone's died. I don't know if mom or dad is losing capacity. Okay? I don't know if we need to do Title 19 planning for a surviving spouse or community spouse. I don't know that unless someone lets me know. I can have the best plans in the world, the best tools in the world, but if nobody does anything about it, they're not worth the paper they're written on. I said, so your kids are my eyes and ears on the ground, so what my goal is that I educate them enough. They don't need to be experts. All they need to know is who to call and what the signs are and when to give me a call. So they're my ground troops. So I want them all on board. I want them to understand that. Now we can decide together if you want them to know that there's $30.26 in this checking account and there's $100,000 in this one and there's this much life insurance and all that, or we can talk very generically. It's up to you, but we're going to have the discussion. Okay? So by doing that, I'm setting a tone in my first meeting with the client and setting the expectation. So this has worked very effectively. So, and the other thing that I find is when I have those kids come into the meeting, okay, the kids, you know, they don't want to come in, okay? And one of the challenges I had to come over or get over is the parents saying, well, my kids are really busy, they got the grandkids and their soccer practice, and this one works this schedule and that schedule. And a long time ago I learned at some meeting, I don't know if it was an AFA meeting or MDRT meeting, where you say, you know what, this is important enough, this is taking your whole lifetime to accumulate. Alls we're asking, what I'd ask is it possible for him to take a half a day off? Because this is that important. And I bet you if you told them that I want to discuss what your inheritance is going to be, we're doing some estate planning, we'd like your input, can you please take the time off? I think they'll find the time. Okay? And so far I haven't had a problem since. You got a question?
My dad, he's got kids in 6 states.
Yeah.
One in this state, but
You know, and that's
Skype or
Skype, GoToMeeting. We get them on. I've been doing conference calls. Now I'm technologically challenged, and I shouldn't admit that because I have a technology tool for everybody to use. But but that's why you collaborate with people that know more than you. I know how to turn a computer on, and if you turn it off, the way I do it, I use a sledgehammer until the lights finally stop blinking. But I haven't figured out how to turn it on again. That's my technology. But I find GoToMeeting is a great way. We've got, and invest in a decent conference speakerphone, you know, because then it makes it really easy for people to hear and everything else. And we just get them included in the meeting. But I still encourage them. I don't want to have 4 kids all on speakerphone. I want to be able to look in their eyes, you know. So I encourage them if it's at all possible. I said, we don't have to do this the day after we get everything done. I mean, if it takes 6 months and they're all coming back for a family reunion, let's just time it around there and I'll make myself available. Okay, but great question. Yeah.
You mentioned this earlier, maybe you're going to get to this, about talking with the parents as to what the right age is to be bringing the kids in. Do you have sort of a, I mean, for those of us that aren't working with the 65 and older crowd, but still have adult children that are 50, let's say, is there a kind of a magic time or age that you want to start bringing those kids in?
It's really up to the parents.
Okay.
You know, Now, when we get involved in the estate planning, and this, I could do a whole subject on this, but we've collaborated with attorneys. We do the legwork, they do the legal work. So I gather all the information. So I know who they want as powers of attorney, backups, healthcare, financial, all those things. Now, when they get to the point where they feel comfortable with it, we'll bring them in. But if they're naming them already as healthcare and financial power of attorney, then they need to be in. But don't prejudge. Now, if they tell me they want their 18-year-old kid in a meeting, and he hasn't graduated from high school and he just brought his first brand new car with every dollar that he had, I might tell them, you know what, maybe they're not ready for this yet, but we might temper what we talk about. They may not be ready, but we decide together what's going to be appropriate to talk about and what's not. One thing I do in my meetings all the time is I play devil's advocate, and I set it up. God gave us 2 ears for a reason. We should be listening twice as much as we talk. Okay? So I'm asking a lot of questions, and when they give me an answer, if I don't feel it's well thought out, I'll challenge them on it. And I tell them, I said, look, I'm going to play devil's advocate. You're going to wonder if I'm loony. Okay? But I'm going to ask you questions back and forth. Not that I'm challenging your answer. I'm challenging you to consider whether that's a real answer or not, or if you've really thought about it. Okay? So I'm going to help get out of you what's really important. And then when we decide to do that with the kids, if they've got an 18-year-old, I'm absolutely challenging that. Usually we want them probably mid to late 20s before we're starting to have those discussions. And I got to say that because my daughter, she's in the back there, and she's 23. So anyway, great question. Any other questions before I go forward? Okay. So here's what some of these benefits are going to be to having these family meetings. So one benefit, first of all, it's the right thing to do. I started talking about that. Our kids are lost souls when it comes to financial literacy. They're not teaching this stuff in the schools. My daughter just graduated from college. How much did you learn about balancing a checkbook? And she's a marketing major. So creates peace of mind within the family. I talked about this. I will tell you how many kids, it's amazing how many kids have come up to me and said, you know what, thank you. We weren't sure. We didn't know. The kids don't know how to approach mom and dad. They're scared, okay? Even though what we heard in all these sessions where the kids are now willing to tell people stuff, it's just not, it's still, when you get to this point, telling mom and dad what to do with their money and how to invest and how to plan, they're just not comfortable with that. So this helps break that ice. Increases the value of the business. Now, what business is this increasing the value of? Yours. Okay, I said, what are the motivating factors for setting this up? Was to increase the value of your business, make it saleable. If you have a relationship with all the beneficiaries of all the estate plans that you've helped deal with, okay, and you can demonstrate that to someone looking to purchase your business, what happened to that value? You've gone from zero to whatever you can negotiate, but that's an important thing. Built-in referral source. Now, I've talked to a lot of agents around the country, and they tell me, but I don't want to work with the kids. They don't have any money, right? Okay, now we saw that one presentation where they're showing these kids at 18 years old that have a business worth $100 million. They're not all broke, okay? And here's what I find when I do these family meetings, okay? Do you think the kids that are broke and irresponsible call me to have a meeting to air their dirty laundry about how irresponsible they are? No, they're too embarrassed to call, okay? But I've made a relationship. I showed that I cared, because I do care, okay? And here's my criteria for working with somebody. I want to work with people that care about their circumstances and their families. I don't care what the dollar amount is. If they care, I'm going to help them. Okay, and if I help them, it leads to good things. It always has, always will. So when I look at this for the kids, and I'll give you an example of one, and some of you have hit me up on the side, and I've shared this with you. I had one client a while back. Clients had a multi-million-dollar estate. I closed a $2.5 million second to die on a family who had just gotten religion. You know the kind, they don't believe in life insurance. And about 2 years prior to meeting me, they said, Jim, You know, we used to have all these policies. They had like 16 policies between the two of them. The biggest policy was $25,000, you know, and they just discovered, they just were born again. We found out we don't believe in life insurance. Biggest ripoff there is, don't talk to us about it. Well, I kept talking and talking and talking. Every time we had a meeting, I said, you know, you guys really should look at this. You know, and they finally said, Jim, if you bring this up one more time, we're going to find another advisor. So I had to figure out a creative way, and that's another topic for another day, to break the ice. Well, then we had a family meeting. We went through all this planning we did. We set up an irrevocable life insurance trust for him. And one of the kids, 35 years old. Okay, he called me up. We did a $600,000 rollover from a 401k of a previous job. How many of you in this room is it worth working with someone who has $600,000 to invest? Anybody? Okay. So how long do you think it took me to sell him on me and my services? 0. It was already made when we did the family meeting. I didn't have to tell him what I did for a living, what my credentials were. He just knew I cared about the family. So he just said, Jim, I got this money I got to roll over. Where do I go? Okay, now I still took the process of making sure I was making a suitable recommendation for him based on his risk and his time horizons and all those kind of things. But I didn't have to spend a minute of time proving to him I was qualified to help him. So what I find is when I do these family meetings, the ones that reach out are the kids that are worth working with. Okay, now guess what? Because I'm working with now the kids. Okay, the kids are typically married, have young children, and one of the things that I do to motivate the parents to get the kids in there, I said, let me guess, okay? How many of your kids do you think have their estate plan in order? That they even have something written down on a cocktail napkin about who's going to raise your grandchildren and who's going to be in control of their money? Okay, now I've had a couple, the ambulance chaser attorneys, the litigation attorneys that have, and I shouldn't call them ambulance chasers, they're actually decent people, but they came to me because they had some clients, you know, with minor children where there were cases settled with dog bites or accidents or whatever, and they talked to me and they said, you know what, we'd like you to work with these people, we like what you do and how you do it and your processes. And what's interesting, I was recommending 529 accounts for some of these kids, okay? Guess what the court said? Nope. All had to be in CDs or money markets. So you get a 4-year-old kid invested in a 0.2% CD. Isn't that the perfect vehicle for a young kid? I mean, it's sad. And I tell the people this. I tell them, I said, look, this is what's going to happen. The courts are going to decide how your grandkids' finances that are going to be set aside for them are going to be used. And then as soon as they have their 18th birthday, they get to buy a new vet. Isn't that cool? You know, so if your kids aren't putting these things in place, who is? So I tell the parents, I said, look, I want them to be my eyes and ears in the ground, but I said, I got an ulterior motive. Okay? Your kids probably don't have any of this set up. And I don't care if they work with me. I just care that they get it done somewhere. Now, you know darn well who they're going to come to for help. Okay, but I set the table. I want them to learn about this so that they can do this stuff. Okay, so the built-in referrals, the kids obviously, now these kids are married, so guess what? You take them through the process. What's that son-in-law or daughter-in-law thinking? Okay, my spouse's parents got everything taken care of. We've got things taken care of. I wonder what mom and dad have. Can you talk to my parents? You know, and a lot of times I'll help prompt that. You know, I'll say, hey, do you know if your parents, have you had your family meeting with your parents yet? And they're like, well, no, I don't know if they have it taken care of or not. Okay, so, but I don't know how to approach them. Okay, so how do you solve that problem? Anybody got any ideas on that? Okay, I'll tell you how I figured it out. Okay, do you think your parents would come to a meeting if you told them you were considering doing estate planning and you wanted their opinion? Guess what? They come in every time. They don't even see it coming. So then I get the parents in. So I don't have to buy any leads. Okay, I got so many leads in my office. I just got to see the people. Just keep telling them to come in. And since I've been doing these family meetings, it's hard for me to handle all the appointments that we have. So, and I've gotten to the point now where I used to, when the people were and if you really want to be effective and you got days in your calendar that you can fill, when you have the family meeting, you say, well, how many of you would like to take care of this? We could schedule an appointment now so I can make sure to set the time aside for you. When would be a convenient time for you? And I'd set them right there on the spot. Well, now, because I don't want to have that much activity, I actually tell them, well, just call me when you're ready. And those are always good ones because when they're ready, they're ready. Okay? Yes?
Do you include the children's spouses?
Do I include the children's spouses? Typically not in a family meeting. Okay? But I leave it up to the client. Do you want their spouses in there or not? Now, one of the things I talk about is in the estate plan. And here's another, and that's a great point because I educate the kids. I said, look, we get involved in the estate plan, and we believe in trust all the time because it's keeping the family in control. So one of the reasons I say I want you kids in here, because sometimes you might be a little embarrassed about your own personal situation. So if you have a bad marriage, a bankruptcy, a lawsuit pending that maybe you didn't want the whole family to know, it's not a good time to be getting the inheritance check. Okay? And one of the things that this trust does is it holds those assets back and protects it for you for when the skies are clear. So I'll talk about that, and it's one of the reasons to get the kids in to make sure they understand that. So when the time comes to distribute, we've talked about those protections that are in place. Yes?
So how would you approach if you are, say you bring the son-in-law, like, I'm daughter-in-law, how would I approach my in-laws, my husband, like, whatever, but, his family, they'll talk to me about, dad will about a few things
Yep.
here and there, but even, like, my husband's mom said, she doesn't know a whole lot about what her dad all has, he doesn't talk a whole lot, how do you get that out? And, me, obviously in the finance industry, is that a position for me to try to get them to have a family meeting, or go where they originally got their life insurance and things like that through?
It's tough because if you're new in the business, it's sometimes they're waiting to see, if you're a little wet behind the ears, let's see how you do before we trust you to come in. But, in your position, because you're in business with your dad, right? Okay, so you ask your dad if he'd be willing to work together with you on that. And what you do is you say, look, we've helped a lot of families out, and I'm still learning this, and it would be a great help for me if you're comfortable, if you'd be willing to help me out. I'd love to have my dad sit in and talk to you because there's some issues. I just came from a meeting in San Diego, and we had tear-jerking stories of people that didn't have their planning in order, that I don't want this to happen to the people I care most about, and I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if something happened to you guys and the stuff I know wasn't taken care of. And the fact that I'm just starting to I'd like to have my dad in because I care enough about you, I want to bring someone in experience. Would you be willing to do that? Does that help? Okay. Yeah. I like winging things, but you do need to be a little bit prepared. So let me go through some of the other things that I have. So here's what I do, okay? I have meeting agendas, okay? How many here use meeting agendas? Okay, awesome. With client management systems and everything else, you got to do it. So what I have is, I've got an agreement with them what we're going to be talking about, but I have everything we've talked about. So like, for example, the estate plan, who the beneficiaries are, who the trustees are, all that stuff is listed, and I will have permission from the clients to talk about it. Now, I don't hand this stuff out, okay? That's what I use, okay? So we'll go through whatever issues we talked about. Now, the system that I use is kind of maybe archaic, but my staff boldens things that I should be talking to them about, and it's boldened and underlined if it's something that the client brought up. So I know where the priorities are. I know what my priorities are. I know what the client's priorities are. So we've got this. So it goes through all the different things that we have. And again, if they have life insurance, they want me to review that, I'll review that. If they have health insurance, long-term care, whatever services they have with me, I will go through and review that. But again, we're going to talk to the client about what they feel comfortable with me talking about. If they want me to talk about things at just 32,000 feet, we'll do it. If we want to get down and dirty in the mud and talk about everything, we'll talk about everything. But I get an agreement from them. Now, some other things that I do is I break down and I use Mobile Assistant. Copy Talk is out there as well. After my meetings, I dictate all my notes, and I follow the same format as our agenda. So I'll talk about all the discussion points, then I'll talk about what the action items are, and I'll talk about what we need to talk about in the next agenda. Okay? So I'll write that stuff in, or I'll dictate the notes. Now, one thing that's really important too is when you're doing a meeting, and this is maybe a little bit off the topic of the family meeting, but I want to keep momentum and I want to keep the clients engaged in the whole process. So because we're comprehensive in our approach, when I have a meeting, okay, when I have the initial meeting, we're gonna figure out what their priorities are. Now, my first meeting, sometimes, you know, my staff sends out all the factual information, everything for them to bring in. But my initial meeting is really just getting to know them, and we might get into a discussion of all this factual information in that first meeting. But if they haven't given me the factual information up front, which 9 times out of 10 it won't be complete, I'll spend some time explaining why this stuff is important. Okay? And then I'll ask them, how long is this going to take you to put together? Is a week long enough? 2 weeks? What is it? And I'll schedule the next appointment. Okay? Or if they don't seem that serious about things, I'll say, well, when you get it together, we'll schedule the next appointment. I'm not going to waste my time chasing people that don't really want the help. But the other thing I'll do is if we have, let's say, 4 different things that are priorities for them, let's say they got an old 401k and that's the reason they came in, they want to take care of that, they want to do estate planning, I've identified they don't have proper life insurance and all that stuff, and I'll say, look, I'll figure out that might take 3 or 4 meetings. So I'll ask them permission, I'll say, you know, I find if we do 1 meeting and then schedule the next meeting, then all of a sudden with their schedules and everything, 2-3 months are going to go by before we have our next meeting. So what I'll do is I'll schedule 3, 4, 5 appointments every week or 2 out, get their commitment of all those appointments, because I said, look, if we go 3 months, we're going to start over again. You know, and I don't know if you want to waste a bunch of time relearning all this stuff, but let's just go ahead and we'll get them scheduled. Now, if we don't need the last couple of appointments, we can always just, you know, cancel them. But if we get them all scheduled right away, okay, then we'll keep taking care of this, okay? And then once I get all the planning done, that's when I talk about, all right, now it's time to get the kids involved, okay? Now, if you're dealing with a young family, obviously you're not dealing with the kids, but you might be dealing with brothers and sisters that are going to be the people that are raising the kids as guardians, that are their powers of attorney, financial, health care, and things like that. So I'm going to want to have meetings with their trustees and whoever they picked. And a lot of times they're picking their parents. Okay, so now that's a reason to bring them in. So now, let's say you do your estate plan, you name your parents and his parents as backups, and you say, look, we want to do a family meeting because we want to talk about the estate planning that we did, and oh, by the way, do you have this stuff up to date? You know, one thing that we had in Wisconsin, we had a Supreme Court ruling in January of 2011. When was HIPAA passed? No, 2001 it went into effect. Okay? Now, what the Supreme Court ruling was, somebody's powers of attorney went all the way to Supreme Court and they said they can't release the medical information because it didn't have HIPAA compliance medical release information in their documents. Okay? So anybody who has documents now prior to HIPAA, they're worthless. Okay? Now, I don't know what it's like in your states, but you need to check into that. Because if you think about it, what is a healthcare power of attorney? It's who tells doctors, hospitals, nursing homes what to do when you can't blink once for yes or twice for no. Okay? So if you have that, okay, so now you can't communicate what your wishes are. Now you have a healthcare power of attorney, and it says if you can't blink once for yes or twice for no, well, who determines that? The doctor. How does the doctor release that information? They need a HIPAA compliant release form. If it's not there, it doesn't work. Okay, so for his parents, maybe they haven't touched their documents. Maybe the last time they did something was 15 years ago. It's out of date, it's null and void, it doesn't work. Okay? So as you're going through this, you got to figure out and strategize a plan that says, you know what, we did this. I used to have something from way back when. My parents had something. I went to this conference. I learned we needed to update it. So the first thing I did is we updated all our estate plan, and we named you guys as powers of attorney. Let me explain how that works. So if you guys have to step in, you understand how it works. And if you go through it that way, they will naturally say, geez, because you can put in there, did you guys have your stuff updated recently? You know, because we can help you with that. Okay? Any other questions on that? Okay? Let me show you something else we did. Now, we got permission from my broker-dealer to do our own reports, which is kind of hard to do. You might have a challenge getting this done. But I wanted to have all the relevant information, and this is real helpful when I'm talking to the kids, because we've done a lot with guaranteed income planning. You know, now we're doing more of the immediate annuities, but in the old days we were doing a lot of variable annuities with guaranteed withdrawals. You know, so what I did is I put in the shaded box all the guarantees in the product. We show what the income is, and one of the things I've done too is I show all the deposits, all the withdrawals, total them all up. We got it dated, what dates those were all made. I look at a couple years ago and I show what it is now. Now the reason behind this design, what do your client statements from the company show? Huh? Current balance. And maybe last quarter, and then, you know, if they lost $30,000 since last quarter, it shows, you know, change in value minus $30,000. It's all focused on short term. How many of us are investing clients for the short term? Okay, that's not the purpose of the accounts. So what my goal is to get them focused on what it really is and what it's doing for them. Not short term, we're talking about long term. Now, the reason I want to be able to have this conversation with the kids, okay, how many of you have heard of Susie Orman or Jane Bryant Quinn? Okay, these are some of the best people for our business, aren't they? You don't need an advisor, just buy my kit. One size fits all, $150, you can learn how to do it yourself, right? Okay, and she talks about these types of products as being the worst thing in the world. Okay, but I will tell you, okay, as Van Miller says, we have the miracles of life insurance. We have the miracles of annuities. We can guarantee with absolute certainty whatever amount of money people want if they're willing to put the money toward it. Okay, there's a lot of people who have, I don't know how many people you had, but I had a big wake-up call in 2000, 2001, 2002, before we had these guaranteed products from an investment standpoint, because in '99, I remember reading a survey, the average return that someone said would be a good return on their investment in '99, do you know what the number was? 37%. The average respondent said that would be a good return. Okay, they were way out of whack. Were people thinking about guaranteed fixed annuities at that time? Absolutely not. Everybody was going to buy .com this and .com that, and everybody's going to get rich and live happily ever after. Okay, but when the market crashed and there were no safety nets, and I will tell you something, for those of you that maybe don't believe necessarily in the guarantees that are in the annuities, I don't think I don't think there's any of you in there, but this is how I believe in it big time. I have clients in 2007, 2008 that were able to sleep at night. They weren't worried about the 3% fees. They just wanted to know they were okay. You know, so these products are great, but the kids, what are they reading? They're the worst thing since sliced bread. Who's going to sue you when mom and dad die? The kids, okay? So when I talk about family meetings, it's not just about creating additional business, it's about staying in business. Because if you don't have the kids buying into the whys here, or you haven't had the discussion of the whys, you leave yourself wide open to getting sued. So that's where I take the time and I review this stuff with the kids, because I don't want it coming back. You know, and if they have a problem with some of these guarantees, they're going to let me know. They're going to tell me, well, why'd you put mom and dad in that? And guess what? Mom and dad are going to say, because we want to be able to sleep at night. We don't need to make 20%. We just need to have enough income so we can live. Okay? So this just shows, you know, again, we go through several columns. I break it down in IRAs, Roth IRAs, deferred annuities, regular investments, and then we just total everything on the bottom, and I total the guaranteed death benefit, I total the guaranteed living benefits, or what has living benefits on it, and then the general account value. So this just gives them a good summary that they understand and they can read. Because if you survey your clients and you ask them, do you understand the statement that the insurance company sent you? You ever ask them? They don't have a clue. And what's funny, we take care of our clients' past statements. They bring in a box. You ever have that happen? They bring the box in. What can I get rid of? I said, we can get rid of all of it. Have you looked at any of it in the last year? No, get rid of it all. We don't need to save it. But I say that kind of in jest, but we will go through their stuff. If you want to offer a service that's different than anybody else out there, offer to go through and clean up that old file bin that they got. Okay? You might find a little bit of business in there when you're going through it. Okay? So I tell people, and I said, look, and if they don't have their accounts with me, I tell them, I said, look, if you have your accounts with me, we can automatically get rid of all the stuff that you don't need on a regular basis. You just come in once a year, we'll just take care of all of it, because we have copies of it all here for you. We have access to everything online. All you got to do is, if you ever want a statement, if you want to know what your accounts were worth on June 23rd, just call us and we'll get you a statement. Okay, we take care of all that and you get rid of all this. You just look at them, they're like, oh, thank God. It's such a relief to them. It's a stress reliever. Okay? And then you tell the kids, this is what we did for your mom and dad. We even helped them clean up all their stuff. Okay, so it's a great opportunity to talk about the great things that you've done and also set the tone, because the kids aren't getting this kind of service anywhere. Here's the other thing, and I'm not here to pitch the service that I have, but one of the things that I looked at when I was looking at how do I make the connection with the kids without investing a lot of time, okay? And the podcast, part of the genesis of why I created the podcast was so that I could get in touch with the kids, get in front of the kids every single week. Now, with NAFA, we've got a monthly version. I also have a weekly version that gets into securities and stuff like that. So here's what I send out, and I get the kids' email addresses and their names. So I have the parents. I said, now tell your kids that they're going to get something from your advisor that's going to help keep them up to date with relevant information so they can make smart decisions about their money like you've made smart decisions about your money. Okay? So, and maybe this might just prompt them, because if for any of you that might have been in my last session, when you ask the parents, do the kids are they going to be able to count on Social Security? What do you think the answer is? Okay? 100% of the time, no. That's what the parents say. Now, I don't believe that. I believe they might still get $1 a day or something. Okay? There'll be something there. They may not even have access to it, but they'll be eligible. They'll just say, well, if you make over $1, then you don't get Social Security. Okay? But Social Security will always be there. Okay? But I don't tell my clients that. If they say it's not going to be there, I agree with them. Okay? Then I ask them, how many of your kids are going to have pension plans? Okay? It's almost zero. Okay? How many of your kids are doing as good of a job saving as you were when you were their age? What do you think the answer is? They laugh. Okay, and it's not because their kids are bad kids. They don't have the ability to save today. If you're talking $1,500 a month for a family health insurance plan with a $5,000 deductible, where do they get the money to save? Okay, what about what you pay for property taxes these days, or gas in the car, what you pay for a car for that matter? Okay, kids just can't afford to save. So, but the thing is, they don't know what to do. So what I tell them is, and I tell the parents, you be my advocate, okay? I'm going to give you a tool, you just make sure the kids listen to it. Okay, so this is a way I make a connection, and how much do you think it costs me to do this? It doesn't cost me anything to use emails, right? I can send 1,000 for the same price as I can send 10,000 or 100,000. I mean, it's free. The internet's the most awesome tool that we have. And here's a way to start establishing those relationships. And when they're ready, they'll call you. Now, if mom and dad pass away, if the kids aren't coming to somebody their mom and dad recommended, okay, do you think they're going to go to some stranger? We've established a relationship with them. When mom and dad pass away with that $2 million policy or the $100,000 or the $50,000 policy, where are the kids going to come to for advice? I don't know how many people went to the Ed Slott deal, but I mean, he's famous for the stretch IRAs. Okay, this is another reason I tell the parents I need to talk to the kids. What is the average amount of time that an IRA stays in an inherited IRA in this country? Was it like 6 months? You might know, Larry. 6 months. Okay, I had a client once. They had, I had the mom, and it was a client. The kids were clients. We worked together in the meetings. We had plenty of family meetings. Mom died suddenly, and they called me up. Okay, they actually called me up before mom even officially died. They were taking her in the ambulance. Jim, what you said, if something ever happens, we should call. And they were calling me while she was being loaded in the ambulance. I've never had anything like that happen before. And I said, well, just let me know what happens. Next day they called me, said she died on the way to the hospital. And they said, what do we do now? I said, well, take care of your final arrangements that you want to do. You know, when you feel up to things, give me a call. You know, if I don't hear from you in about a month or so, I'll give you a buzz. But, okay, if you don't sign anything or make any decisions until we get together. Okay, so then what happened? Okay, we finally get together. The gal comes into my office and she says, well, you know, yesterday before we came in, want to get a head start on stuff, and she filled out a claim form for a $250,000 401k, as well as a $50,000 deferred annuity. And the agent that Quick came there and did that was her cousin. Okay, Quick did a $50,000 to put her in a new product right away. So there was $25,000 of gain on that. There was a $250,000 on the 401k. They had a small farm. They had record profits with crops that year. So they had about $100,000 coming from that. He had a business that had $150,000 in net profit, and she worked full-time with about a $60,000 a year salary, putting this $250,000 being taxed at about 40%. Okay, now, she said, what do I do, Jim? I said, well, you already signed the forms. Do we get any do-overs with those? No. Okay, so what I said is, you go down, mom worked at a bank, okay, and the 401k was at a bank. I said, what you do is you go to their office that you mailed that to, and you camp out, and you wait for the postman to come, and when he comes, you tackle him before he gets into that bank. You go through that mail, and you find your letter, and you rip it up. That's what you do. And she just kind of laughed, and I said, well, she said, well, what do I really need to do? Well, they had a good relationship at the bank. They were able to call them, and they pulled it aside and didn't process it. So fortunately, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. Okay? But how many kids understand stretch IRAs? If you guys don't understand stretch IRAs, if you don't understand how the beneficiaries work, you know, go to Ed Slott's conference or talk to some of the other qualified people that know how to do that stuff. Okay? Or partner with somebody that can help you with that planning. But that's another reason to have family meetings, is to help those kids when they're going to inherit those retirement accounts to make the right choices. So I'll just summarize. So at any rate, that's the podcast that gets sent out. Family meetings have been huge in my practice. I told you what my marketplace is, you know, and you know, we've been very successful in our practice, and we've become the go-to place because we've differentiated ourselves with service. Everybody else out there is transactional. I mean, it's amazing. We have an amazing opportunity in this business. It's the best time ever to be in this business. You just have to do this much more than the competition, and the business will come in droves. You know, so set yourself apart by doing something like this, because most people are just after the money. When you show people how much they care, you have unlocked the keys to the golden kingdom. So with that, are there any other questions? All right, so how many of you are going to start doing family meetings? All right. Thank you for your time.